Hello and welcome to Unramblings. I'm Fafix.
And I'm Charlotte.
And if that sounded familiar, you might have listened to our podcast before. If not, you should.
With the success of our podcast, we're branching out into videos, and we thought we'd give you guys a chance to get to know us a little bit better.
We asked some of our listeners for questions they had for us, and we've compiled a selection of them to answer today. To help us with that, we're joined by our friend and fellow creator, Gerngar, in the role of Question Master.
Hello, my name is Gerngar, or Gern for short. I use she, her pronouns. I have a background in linguistics, but I currently make video game related content. You can catch my cozy, chaotic streams on Twitch Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturday nights, or you can see my YouTube videos when I put those up.
Before we get into the questions, we're going to cover some broad strokes on who we are and what we do.
So in the broadest sense, we talk about stories and storytelling, and we like to cover a whole range of media, from books and TV to music and video games, and we're pretty much open to anything. We've known each other since 2012, and we've been married since 2016. Me and Fafix, not Gerngar.
On a more personal note, you may have picked up that I was born in England. I immigrated to the United States back in 2014. I use they, them pronouns. I have a background in storytelling and literature, with a couple of degrees that are serving me really well now that I'm making videos on YouTube.
I'm from several different parts of the United States because I'm from a military family. I am also a social scientist with degrees in psychology and social work, and I use she, her pronouns.
Okay, let's get into it.
What works have had the most influence over you or had the biggest impact on you?
That's a tricky one to answer because there's so many that have had very varied influences. I think probably Anne McCaffrey's Pern Dragon Rider series had a huge impact on me because it was the series that really got me into reading as like a young teenager. Before then I'd read books here and there but hadn't like just consumed book after book after book. I think also Raymond Chandler's The Big Sleep, that really got me into the mystery genre and had a lot of effects on my writing as well.
I agree. It's a really hard question just because I've read so many things and consumed a whole lot of media and stories in general, but I think I'm going to go with the Wheel of Time series just because it's one that I've read and reread a lot, and it has a lot of themes that I think have been really relevant and influenced kind of my perspective on certain things.
What tale do you consider almost perfect story-wise?
Even almost perfect is pretty difficult to do. I think the one that comes closest to me is actually the film version of The Shawshank Redemption. I think it's just a really good demonstration of showing terrible lows, but also providing hope. And like I think the narrative ties together very well with the narrator and things as well.
Again, I agree about Almost Perfect being even like that is a hard bar to hit, but I'm going to go with a more recent thing and say Palm Springs. I know that not a whole lot of people have actually watched this, and maybe I only think it's almost perfect in comparison to Groundhog Day, anyway. But I feel like that movie, like it does what it wants to do without like running afoul of a whole lot of things that could have kind of derailed it. And it ends up being, I don't know, a thing that just feels very genuine and also hopeful in a, I don't know, kind of a, humanity maybe doesn't suck as much as it seems to kind of a way.
For some reason, we're focusing on things about people who need hope right now. Don't know why.
Yeah, it's weird.
Strange. It's absolutely strange. Well, on the topic of things that are almost perfect, is there a series that was almost perfect but then was ruined, so now you can't go back to it?
So I might say How I Met Your Mother, just because it hasn't aged well. And like even during the runtime of the show, there were a few episodes that like even upon like them coming out were just like cringy or kind of messed up, or, trying to get laughs from something that was kind of, punching down and not cool. And otherwise though, like it was such an entertaining show, and it was one of those things that like a lot of people were watching and kind of following along and excited about. And so for a while there was this sort of like momentum to it where it was really engaging and was really great. And it was the sort of thing you could just kind of put on and rewatch also. But at this point, like I know there's those landmines there. And so it's not the comforting thing that it was at the time that I enjoyed it,
Just to be clear, you're not saying that you thought it was ruined by the ending that a lot of people didn't like, though.
No, not the ending. More like there's some points where they're kind of using transphobia or homophobia as like the butt of a joke, or there's like a yellow face episode, like stuff like that. So those things, and also just like in retrospect, looking at it a little bit more critically of like the whole character of Barney Stinson and like the apologist like take on that kind of behavior. Like in retrospect, like I just can't ignore it the way that I was kind of able to be swept along when I was first experiencing the series.
I think for me, it's Veronica Mars. I came to the show very recently. I think I watched all of it within the last year or so. I really enjoyed it to begin with because it was, strong female character. It's the detective genre that I do like so much, and I thought it was a nice take on that sort of PI. The end of season 4 just ruined it for me. They really highlighted how much of the show did rely on using trauma as a driving force for the narrative. Like every part of that show relies on Veronica experiencing horrible trauma and that being the basis for all of it. And I don't know that if they did a season 5, I could go back to it. I don't think I can go back and rewatch it and enjoy it because I know that stuff is coming.
As a side note, I am excited to hear you talk about trauma because I am personally very interested to see you talking about trauma in the future and how it deals with LGBT issues in stories. Back to the questions. What is your guilty pleasure book, movie, or TV show?
I don't think that I really have one. It's kind of an ethos that I try and follow, is to not feel guilty about something I enjoy. There are certainly things that I watch that I know a lot of people like pan for various reasons or think isn't very critically good or something, but if I enjoy it, and I'll tell people I enjoy it and for what reasons. So I don't really have guilty pleasures when it comes to media and stories.
So I feel similarly, like there are definitely some things that I can enjoy that I like fully acknowledge are not good things. Like they're not made well, or they might have messages and themes that I know are like messed up or problematic and that I wouldn't be able to enjoy if I encountered them for the first time now. But because of the point in time when I was exposed to them and was able to enjoy them, I can. So things like Charmed or like Big Wolf on Campus, the stuff that was really like, taking over TV when I was like 12 to 15 years old and, didn't really have a critical eye or something to have on and entertain me while I was doing my homework or whatever. Like those kinds of things, like I know I'm going to get judged for like, enjoying them, but I don't care. They can be bad. I can still enjoy them.
While focusing on media that you do enjoy, what is something that you would like to see adapted into a different form of media, like a video game to a movie or something like that?
So I'm actually really lucky about this question because the stuff that immediately comes to mind is stuff that is being adapted like right now or like it's in the works. So when I was reading the book Seven Eves, which I really enjoyed, I remember thinking like, oh, this would make such a great film. And they are making it a film. And in fact, when it was written, it was originally conceptualized as a film. So that totally makes sense. And then the Wheel of Time series, which I mentioned earlier, is being adapted right now for Amazon Prime to be a television series, which is super exciting. And then let's see. Oh, also American Mickey's Alice. I really enjoyed those games. And I know that they've been kind of trying to translate those into film for a while, but they've just sort of been in production limbo for over a decade at this point. But if that actually came together, I think that'd be really cool.
I've just been so burned by cross-media things that I'm just hesitant about any of them. Yeah, it's difficult. I think I'd be really interested to see what they would do with something like The Last of Us into a TV show or a movie. But I think it does work so well in the video game format. I don't know how well it would cross over. And I think you might get into a Walking Dead problem where they're killing people off for trauma rather than for good story reasons. And yeah, it's a whole thing. Maybe a remake of The Big Sleep or something where they could modernize some of it and correct some of the issues that appear in the original. It's a book written in the 30s. It has some stuff in there that isn't really okay today. Maybe the Pern books up until they got weird. Yeah, I don't know. I'm hesitant. I would rather things stay in their wheelhouse to some extent. Although they're making a movie of the Uncharted games and that looks like that might actually come out good. They've got Tom Holland playing a younger Nathan Drake, and he's being coached by Nolan North, who voiced Nathan Drake. It could be good. I'm almost hopeful for that. So,
very good, very good. Same here. Someone just woke up from a 10-year coma. What do they need to catch up on?
So I think maybe first, like some of the big cultural phenomenon type things from the past 10 years. So stuff like Hamilton and like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, maybe. Also, again, I mentioned Middle of Time, like that series was started in like the late 80s or early 90s, and it concluded in the last 10 years. So if people were into that, then obviously that would be a thing to finish. Also, the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin has won a bunch of awards and is just really excellent. Like I've never read anything that's constructed the way that it is and deals with the themes that it does. And so I think that would also be a really great one to like shove at somebody and be like, here.
I feel like the last 10 years has had so much and so little at the same time. I think Jack White's solo career might be not necessarily a story, but I know there's a lot of video games that spring to mind. I think because I spend a lot of time like reading older books because I take so long to get around to them. Like I think anything made by Naughty Dog, Horizon Zero Dawn, VR is something they should try out because that's going to blow their mind. Yeah, those things.
All right. Well, more podcast specific, what is your production and editing process like? What do you cut and what do you keep?
I think we keep most of the like main content. There's a few things that I know we cut out and we put those in like extra episodes for our patrons. But mostly I think what we cut out is just the stupid stuff and the errors and just general noise. Charlene does most of the editing for this, so she should answer it. I'm going to shut up.
Yeah, I do most of the podcast editing, and we cut out a lot of excess silence, like Fafix was saying, but also points where we're like sort of going back to our notes or figuring out like what we want to talk about, those sorts of like production-y type of conversations. Also points where we've kind of excessively explained stuff or gone off on a tangent that we later recognize either was inaccurate or just not super relevant. High Shadow. Or just not super relevant. So, that kind of a thing. And we also always record like a few different bigger questions. And so we'll cut, all but one of those from the podcast. And then those outtakes will go again in like the patron bonus content stuff. So that also kind of helps us make sure that that's interesting and also not like that we're putting out the whole 3-hour recording session or whatever.
We also cut out all the cat noises.
Yeah, we try to cut out the cat noises. It's not always possible. This is Shadow. He's most often the cat featured in our work because he is our most vocal cat.
Shadow, do you have a comment on this?
He only has comments when you don't want him to.
All right. And what do you look for when deciding what stories to feature?
I think primarily that there's something that they're either saying about the world in an interesting way, or something that the fact that they were created is an interesting fact for that. Anything where there's just some interesting dynamics in how the story is told.
Yeah, I mean, things like that. Basically, we started this podcast to kind of dedicate time to just have deep conversations about works that we were interested in, like the stuff that we wanted to talk about, because it can be hard to kind of find the time to just kind of settle in and just have that kind of a long and in-depth back and forth about something. So anything that we're consuming where we're just having all these thoughts and like we're just so excited by what something is doing or how it's doing it, like those are the things where we'll be like, oh, we could totally do a podcast about that, or like, oh, we should do a video on this particular little topic that we are just finding so much to say about.
All right. What would you like to cover but haven't yet?
Ooh, we have a whole list of those.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things. Like, I keep an actual list of all the things that we're considering covering, and it gets longer and longer as people recommend more things. I think if I had to pick one thing, it's an odd choice, but there's a book called Hyde by Daniel Levine, which retells the story of the strange case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde from the point of view of Hyde, and works to sort of show how different perceptions of the same events can be interpreted differently or shown differently to try and make Hyde a more sympathetic character, or sympathetic character at all. He's not in the original. But I have to convince Charlene to read both first, so that one's taking a while to happen.
I mean, it's not like I'm unwilling to read it. It's just like we've got a lot going on, and I've had a hard time focusing on reading lately, just with everything going on. But there are some things that I definitely want to cover. It would be nice to cover Wheel of Time. I don't think we will, though, because it's like 15 books and Fafix is only like 6 books in or 4 books in. But also I'd like to cover The Magicians, like the book series and the show. And I, in large part, want to talk about that because of the adaptation. Like, I really like the way that they handled the show and like the choices that they made that were different. So I think that would be really cool to kind of get into. And also there are some like idea or concept centered shows that I'd like to do, like not rather than focusing on a particular work or like a couple of different adaptations of something, to look at like a theme or an idea and the way it's handled in a lot of different stuff.
As a follow-up question, since you have such a long list, how do you prioritize what you're going to cover next?
Sometimes it's as simple as what we have time to consume the media for. There's definitely a lot of times where like we'll do an episode on a movie because we need to put an episode out and we have time to watch a movie. So that will bump things to the top. If there's anything that's particularly culturally relevant, with like
where timing is relevant.
Yeah. We'll do seasonal things. That is often an easy way to pick those things. Or if something is just getting an awful lot of attention, like a lot of people are consuming it, then we'll tend to go and take a look at that. That's what happened with our episode on Avatar: The Last Airbender. People were talking about it, we'd never seen it, so we went and watched it and did an episode.
Yeah, or if we're like consuming something and we're really excited about it and like we just want to talk about it, and all of the things we want to talk about are like right there on the surface. And I think that's something that happened with stuff like Mandalorian, and when we finished Steven Universe, you know, we were like bubbling with all these ideas. It's like, let's do this now and capture that while it's fresh, you know?
When you're making your list, what are some things that you won't do a podcast or episode on?
Well, one thing we want to avoid just having episodes on things that we don't like, because we just don't want to spend a whole bunch of our time being negative and shitting on stuff. There's enough of that out there already. We'd rather talk about the things that we like, and like not be critical of the things that aren't handled well on something that we like, but for that to not be all that it is, you know? So that's the thing. Like, if we're not just going to do an episode on something to just hate on it for a full episode. We did a pre-ramble where we kind of did that, but that's a much shorter thing, like a much like 20 minutes or something. But yeah.
Apologies to being John Malkovich.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is that we try to avoid doing things where there's already so many people talking about it, or it's just such a big thing that everyone like there are other people who just know too much more about it than we do for it to be worth us talking on it. So things like Tolkien or the like Star Wars in general, like we don't want to do the main films because people know all about those already. We did The Mandalorian because it is a spin-off sort of standalone thing, and they've wiped a lot of the extended universe. It's one of the hesitations about doing The Wheel of Time is that there are already podcasts that do episodes on every chapter of those books, and we can't one-up that in 1 or 15 episodes. So.
Yeah, and also just back to the idea of not covering stuff where we just don't really have the the expertise or the experience that's relevant to doing the idea justice and really discussing it in a way that, makes sense to do. So there are things where we just don't feel like we're necessarily the people to cover that work for like representation reasons or experience reasons. We
did kind of want to do an episode on Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, but felt that we weren't the right people to do that conversation, so we skipped that one in the end, which is a shame because it's a great movie and we really enjoyed it. So
that movie always gives me tingly feelings. I was really hoping y'all would say you don't have the wheelhouse for Wheel of Time.
Well, now you said it, so.
All right. Well, I particularly liked the Palm Springs episode where Charlene talked about how Groundhog Day didn't age well. Are there any other books or films that you look at differently today?
I think the one that most stands out for me is perhaps obviously the Harry Potter series. I definitely grew up with those and enjoyed them a lot as a child and teenager. With the author's recent attacks on the trans community, she's really shown her hand about how she views the world, and you can talk as much as you want about separating the artist from the work. But that's always going to be what I'm thinking about if I pick those books up, and probably if I watch those movies. So I don't think I can really go back to those, and I don't think we're going to talk about them on the podcast for that reason either.
Yeah, I mean, we probably wouldn't have anyway, just because of the same, like, trying to avoid stuff that's already oversaturated. But also, like, the context of her views also makes it impossible to miss the hints of that are woven in the books, like the treatment of Rita Skeeter and things like that. So, it just kind of adds this layer of grossness. We also already mentioned How I Met Your Mother. I already did, so that's another one where I feel like it hasn't aged well, or it's like harder to ignore the stuff that's just not cool in it,
I think a lot of comedy has started to age very quickly, which I think is good because it's about the fact that our society is progressing away from those things, and jokes that were punching down on communities people didn't care about 10 or 5 years ago. Now we look at that and go, no, you can't do that. So I think that's a good advancement.
All right, well, here's a fun one. If you cosplayed, which character would be your go-to?
So I think like we have cosplayed before, like at like conventions and stuff, like Dragon Con. Like I've dressed up as Alice, both Disney's Alice and American McGee's Alice, and I did a costume that was Silk Spectre, like the 50s one from Watchmen, the first one. I'm going to dress up as Princess Bubblegum for Halloween this year. So we do cosplay stuff. It's just, I don't really have a go-to, I like to kind of switch it up.
I find costumes and cosplaying really difficult. There's not a lot of 6 foot tall, long haired people that sort of mean that I can easily feel like I've got the right body type, which I know shouldn't always matter. And there's not a lot of gender fluid people to cosplay as that I'd be more comfortable with. I have cosplayed as Marceline from Adventure Time with a fun couple guitar I made. And I kind of want to try doing Jasper from Steven Universe. I think that would be a fun one to do and require lots of body paint. But I don't really have a go-to because I just sort of struggle with it at the moment. So
if you have any suggestions, comment below the video for what they should dress up as.
You did dress as Nathan Explosion one time for Dragon Con.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
All right. If you could exist in a fantasy world, which world would you want it to be in?
That question I just feel needs so many caveats to it. Like, do you exist in the fantasy world with the powers that might be associated with that world? Because with that, there's many that might be good. Without it, I'll pass. It never works well for the people who don't have powers in that. You don't want to be in the X-Men universe but not have powers. Then you're just going to be like a victim of Magneto at some point.
I don't know. I feel like in the X-Men universe, there's just no winning. Like, if you don't have powers, you're a victim of the mutant war. And if you do, then you're a victim of persecution from the regular humans. Like, no, I mean, there's no win scenario there. But thinking about kind of the issues that you've raised, I would probably say the world of D&D. Because there's a whole lot of flexibility in terms of like what you can do and what sort of abilities you can develop. Anyone can obtain some form of magic if they really want to, and there are several different ways to do that. There's like a consistent and attainable system for getting better at stuff. So I think maybe that one.
Yeah, okay, I can see the appeal of that. I guess the part of the thing about wanting to have powers in those worlds is that you then have more agency within those stories.
Yeah.
And I guess within D&D, everyone can make some sort of a difference. I guess that's kind of what I want. So.
All right. Well, where can everybody find you? Where can the fans interact with you?
You can obviously find us all around here on YouTube. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or just type in Unramblings, we come up. You can also find us on Patreon if you'd like to support the show. That also gets you access to a Discord, which means then you can yell at us whenever you want and tell us what we said wrong.
Yeah. So I think that's everything that we wanted to cover in the video, right? Thanks, Gerngar, for coming and being our awesome question master. Is that what we called you at the beginning?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Question master. And hopefully some of you guys will also check out her Twitch streams because they're a lot of fun and she's very entertaining. So definitely give her a chance to entertain you.
Thanks for inviting me. Hope
You're
to see
welcome.
y'all on my streams.
We hope you enjoyed this video, and we hope that you will go and check out Gerngar on Twitch. If you did enjoy this video, we hope that you will check out some of our other videos and some of our podcasts, and hopefully we'll see you on Discord sometime.
And go ahead and hit subscribe, like, comment, and all the other YouTube things and such.
Mm-hmm.